if you really want to enter the industry, my advice is just learn how to think like a developer. You don't really need to be a developer per se. Learning coding is not really for the purpose of you being a developer. Learning coding is more like changing your mindset to think like a developer.
Welcome to Coding Your Career, the go-to destination for those looking to kickstart a career in tech. Join us as we explore the journeys of tech career switchers and gain valuable insights from industry experts. Discover how and why people have made the switch into tech and obtain inspiration for your own career journey.
I am your host, Adam Artuccio, and together, let's code your career.
The Coding Your Career podcast is powered by Holberton School Australia. Learn how to walk, talk and code like a software engineer with Holberton in 2023. Apply now for the October 2 cohort.
Hello and welcome back to Coding Your Career. Today we're joined by a very special guest, a tech veteran with over 25 years experience. He's currently a senior professional service consultant at GBG and the director of Code.Sydney, which is an organisation that both fosters new tech talent and aids non-for-profit initiatives. With his wealth of knowledge and dedication to service, I'm so excited to hear about his experiences and his journey. So without further ado, let's welcome Engrama to the podcast. Welcome, Engrama. How are you?
First of all, thanks for this opportunity. I'm actually eager to share my knowledge and hopefully insights to particularly career switchers, those upskillers and cross-skillers in the IT industry.
Amazing. It's absolutely great to have someone with so much experience here with me today. Could you start by introducing yourself to the listeners, sharing a bit about your background and what you're working on today?
Oh, yes, Adam. Yep. I think first and foremost, my full-time work, 9 to 5, I work with GBG. It's a software company based in the UK. Primarily, we focus on fraud management, identity verification, and location intelligence. So I've been with the company since 2007, running almost 16 years now. And I dealt with these various roles within the company, starting from support consultant, then head of customer support and testing, and then moved to a professional services team last year. I actually moved laterally between two domains. Initially, I'm with location intelligence and now with identity verification side of things. Outside of work, as you know, I think this is how you met me, is I established Code.Sydney back in 2016. I feel that I'm late in the career now, so I thought to share some of my learnings, insights, experiences to beginners, particularly career switchers around software development. So that's pretty much my background.
You've said you've worked at one company for 16 years. That's amazing to show commitment to one company. And you've started up Code.Sydney, I think from what I looked at was about 6 years ago. So you've shown commitment to a few organizations, which is something to be proud of. If you don't mind just sharing or winding the clock back, sharing your early days into tech, what sparked your interest to move into this field?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I guess I am going to share with you my history back in the Philippines. It all started when I was in primary. I really liked playing computer games, the same as any other tech nerds there. Starting with Atari, those Nintendo family computers. But when I entered high school, that was year 7, back in 1989, I got exposed to tech, history of computers. I'm just lucky enough that my school offers computing courses, even in high school. And I get to play around with Commodore 64. That's an old style personal computer. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with that. Maybe you were not born yet, Ada. Commodore 64, we have an external diskette. It's a floppy disk. It's the icon that you normally see as a save as button. That's pretty much a real floppy disk. Those are the days that sparked my interest. And because of that, I entered the university with a mathematics degree with the intent of getting a computer science major. So being a BS mathematics degree at a local university in Manila, we have an option after the second year in uni whether to pursue actuarial science or computer science. I decided the latter because at that time I thought it's getting some traction in terms of popularity, in terms of excitement. That's pre-internet days, by the way, just bulletin boards. So I've seen how it transitioned from the non-internet days to the internet days up to mobile devices.
That's really cool. Obviously, me being from Australia, I don't understand how that may have been for you in the Philippines. And I know you started your career in the Philippines and then you moved and you worked in Saudi Arabia, I think it was, and now in Australia. Do you mind just outlining that journey, how it was in the Philippines and then your journey to Australia?
Yep. After graduating from the University of Santo Tomas in Manila, I was lucky enough to be one of those trainees at Citibank. It's a local Citibank branch in the Philippines. They have something like information technology training program every year, and I was part of that batch 22. So I worked with them for a year or so. Then pre-Y2K, if you know about Y2K bug or the year 2000 bug. Y2K bug is sort of like a bug in the handling of the year in computer programs. Because in the old days, around 70s or 80s, they tried to save some memory. So they only put the last two digits, the 0101 for 1998, January 1. So when it goes to 2000, it will be 000101. So that's what Y2K bug is. That's pretty much what triggered me to switch to a COBOL programming language, because at that time, the Y2K bug is primarily exposed in the mainframe computing side of things, the large enterprise mainframe computers. And the language, the king there is pretty much COBOL, or Common Business-Oriented Language. It's a programming language being used until now. Chances are when you're withdrawing money from an ATM, you're still dealing with the COBOL code until now, even in Australia. After that, I moved to, of course, Saudi Arabia, where I met my wife and my kid was born there. And I believe Saudi Arabia gave me the opportunity. I work in one of the biggest banks there. It's called Riyadh Bank. Riyadh Bank gave me the opportunity to take leadership role in software development, particularly dealing with large enterprise, mission-critical, real-time transactional system. I believe that gave me confidence of being a solid developer exposed to those type of mission-critical systems. That's the core, actually, of my development career. And then in 2007, we moved here in Australia. And it just so happened that in 2007, remember, if you notice, my background is purely mainframe. So when I arrived here, I noticed there's not that much mainframe jobs. There's not that much COBOL jobs. So I think that's one area where career switchers may want to, reskillers or upskillers may want to think about, because you have to bend with the wind, right? There's an opportunity for you, then you open your own door. So at that time, I decided to just learn Java. And it so happened that Mastersoft Group at that time, which was acquired by GBG in 2018, I was actually hired by Mastersoft Group, the old company which was acquired by GBG. At that time, they have COBOL products, which is being transitioned to Java. So it's like perfect match for me. They hired me because of my COBOL skills. You can still see COBOL book here. Actually, my props.
That's really cool. And it's a pretty inspiring journey that you've had there. To me, being from Australia this whole time, I don't really understand the cultural differences that you may have experienced. So from going from the Philippines to the Middle East to Australia, what are some cultural differences, especially in the tech industry, that you noticed?
Actually, even outside the tech industry, we had different cultural backgrounds, right? There are some high context cultures and low context cultures. And I think in the Philippines, for example, during my time, I'm not sure now because it's been a while since I last visited, but I believe it's still the same because it's our core culture. We don't want to offend people. We somehow get around how we're going to say it without offending the other person. But in some cultures, you have to really just say what it is. You have to adjust depending on the culture and actual, setup.
Yeah, like you don't think about that unless you do reflect upon the differences, because obviously me being in Australia, I've always learned to speak in a certain way just based on the people that I'm around. So it's really interesting to hear that that was one of the obstacles that you were facing. And there's lots of people that move from other countries to Australia in search of jobs in tech. I guess you could say lucky, or I guess you were well skilled to move into your job. But for people that are coming to Australia, may not have those skills, what advice do you have for them to move into the tech industry?
I think I've always been a proponent of coding because the IT industry at its core, if you come to think of it, it's really all about automation. It's really all about giving something to automate something manual or repetitive, or to automate a system to make it more seamless and more efficient, more effective, more productive. At its core, it's all about coding. Whether you will end up as Scrum Master, Business Analyst, Software Quality Assurance Engineer, or, those peripheral jobs around coding. At the end, the industry's core is really all about coding. So I guess if you really want to enter the industry, my advice is really just learn how to think like a developer. You don't really need to be a developer per se. Learning coding is not really for the purpose of you being a developer. Learning coding is more like changing your mindset to think like a developer. Because once you enter the industry, chances are you're going to deal with the developer at one point because that's the industry. We're producing software. I guess my advice is really more like learn how to code to some degree, but not to the point of being a gun developer or gun programmer. You're going deeper into the nitty-gritty of all those low-level stuff. Just enough to collaborate with the rest of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've touched on the mental switch people have to make in order to communicate with the developers. And I've seen that you're a believer of servant leadership. Could you just introduce that philosophy to me and the listeners and share how it plays in your work?
Yeah, I always tell my son he's about to go to uni next year because he asked me if there's one advice that I can give to him, what is it? I always tell him just be kind and everything follows. And I think servant leadership is different from being kind. I think that's the core of servant leadership. You just need to be empathetic. You just need to be open for ideas. That's servant leadership, and always be mindful of where your colleagues or customers are coming from. At the end of the day, I think once you have that core mindset of being kind, and there's a caveat there, be kind and be competent and committed. Kindness with commitment and competence. But 80% of kindness with 20% of commitment and confidence, I think you can always improve on those. But kindness is difficult to improve on that if your personality is a little bit outside of that realm. So that's pretty much the servant leadership for me.
It's really great to talk to someone that's so passionate about kindness. And I guess that leads on to why you may have started Code.Sydney. Obviously, we've spoke to you previously about how you started it, but could you just introduce about the inception and how now it's grown to what it is?
I think that was 2016 when I started a Coursera course, and it's all about Python program. At that time, Python is a biggie, and I learned about it and actually fell in love with the syntax and semantics of the language. So I thought somewhat like all my COBOL background came to me because it's easy to understand, easy to absorb. And because of that, I said to myself, I'm in the late stage of my career. I think it's about time for me to share it with the community, particularly those non-coders or non-technical people who would want to somehow explore our industry. That's the time when I started going to the state library every Friday lunchtime. There's a free study room there for 5 people. I just set up the meetup group and I started growing from then on. And now I believe there are around over 3,000 members in that meetup group. It's still active, and we have a Discord channel. We had a Slack channel before with 600 members, but we moved to Discord a year or two ago during the pandemic. We thought it's more cool. Targeting more younger developers, I guess, or beginner developers.
You're listening to Coding Your Career, powered by Holberton School Australia. Through a collaborative, project-based curriculum, Holberton trains job-ready software engineers in just 9 months. Visit holbertonschool.com.au to learn more.
I remember last time we spoke, you said you were at the state library and sometimes no one would show up, so you were at the state library by yourself. And now you've grown to a community of over 3,000 people. So obviously there's some key milestones in there. Do you want to just elaborate on how you grew it to what it is now?
Oh, yes, there are some key milestones there. I guess that's what they said. When you start something, the first believer is also critical, right? Someone must believe in you. I always tell my colleague, Steve, he's based in Singapore now. He's the very first mentor of Code.Sydney. At that time, he was working with TapTao, community leader. He said to me, he attended one library session. He told me that he wants to help and he believes in what I have started. So that's pretty much the first milestone. Because of that, we grew to some degree. And then at some point, I saw Tony Johnson, Promi, who's actually handling the free code community in Sydney. I approached them. I said, we're more of like Python-based developers. Can we merge so we cover full stack? because they're more like web development, right? That's how we grew and double our size at that time. And then it just continues to grow. The good thing there is that the community became more generic, more agnostic to any technology. It's sort of like we can focus on web development, data science, and others.
That's really amazing. And it's pretty inspiring to see anything grow from nothing to what it is now. And you should be really proud of yourself for doing that, especially in your spare time, as I guess it's a hobby to you. And you're dealing with non-for-profits, which is an amazing thing to be doing. Is there a particular inspiring story or project from Code.Sydney that stands out to you?
The project is pretty much not very highly technical. It's really a beginner-friendly project. But I think what stands out is that in the past few years, I've managed to saw the growth of some beginners and managed to be one of their character reference when they apply. So the potential employers calls me and I speak based on what I have seen with their engagement in Code.Sydney project. Our goal of helping them get their foot in the door, and we managed to somehow give our assistance in that field, in that area. So I guess that's one of the key highlights of the existence of Code.Sydney.
Yeah, amazing that you're able to help people kickstart their career. And that's the same thing as that we're doing at Holberton, helping people go from no code into an entry-level tech job. So I guess our missions are aligned, but really great that you're working with non-for-profits. As a mentor, what are some common traits that you're seeing in these successful tech professionals that you're now moving into their entry-level jobs?
That's really a good question, Adam, because a lot of people, particularly those who are non-IT, I'm not saying everyone, but majority of their motivation is that it's more like they know that it's a bit lucrative in terms of compensation, but I think you really need to give what is needed in order for you to somehow successfully transition from a complete beginner to a paid developer. What I'm saying here is that you need to really put the effort, the time, as what they say, blood, sweat, and tears. You really need to work hard. It's not just about taking a lesson, going through courses. It's all about following it up, follow through, make sure that you continue learning even after lessons or courses. I always say to newcomers in Code.Sydney that it's more like a learning community because that's really our goal. It's really more like continuous improvement. That's my advice to them.
Really cool. Touching back on mentorship, how has mentorship played a role in your own tech career? And what advice would you give to someone looking for a mentor in the tech industry?
Looking for a mentor in the tech industry, actually, it's a case-by-case basis. Some people, for example, they are happy just doing self-learning. But there are some who flourish when they attend more structured courses. So it's really a case-by-case basis. We cannot generalize it. I've seen people in Code.Sydney who's actually just doing self-learning, and I feel he's more like a senior developer now, just because of self-learning. But in my experience, more are on the other side, which is more like they require structured learning, some hand-holding, some classroom type of courses.
Mentors itself, I always hear from our students at Holberton that when they reach out to a mentor that helps them and just gives them advice, it really reassures them that they're doing the right thing. Did you have a mentor yourself when you were starting in tech that guided you and gave you confidence that it's the right career for you?
Honestly speaking, my mentors are primarily my bosses at work. Since I started working, it's really more on how they provide insights, in particular around the project that we're working on. Not just the bosses, of course, my colleagues as well. They give me insights. So it's really more like on-the-job mentorship. And I think with the 70-20-10 rule, wherein 10% is classroom, 20% peer-to-peer mentorship, and 70% is really on-the-job experience and mentoring. I believe in that one, the 70-20-10 rule.
It's great that you've put these things into clear percentages that you can figure out and tell people that you're working with. So that's really cool. We touched on the benefits of working in tech, one of them being the financial incentives, but flexibility is also a huge thing for a lot of people. You're working at GBG, you're running Code.Sydney, and you're also the Justice of Peace for New South Wales. How is your work-life balance and how are you managing to do all of this?
It's my circumstance. I only have one son. After primary school, before going to high school, that's the only time I managed to start Code.Sydney. Little by little, I'm having some free time. At that point as well, I'm a bit matured already.
with my role at GBG. So it's more of like it's in my blood. So not that much of a pressure, I guess, when I was still working in the location intelligence space. I managed to have an extra time when he went to high school. And now he's year 12. I feel like I'm getting more free time. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll just do justice of the peace. So it's a gradual progress. So that's how I gain more time. It's not really sort of like I have it in one shot and I'm able to manage everything. Because of those extra time, at least I can manage it. It will be difficult if we're talking here of having a young family with small babies, small kids. I don't think I'll be able to do that.
You're doing a great job balancing your kid with all these extracurricular things that you're doing. And the love of learning is a great strategy. But I'm sure there would have been times where you would have been very stressed and even burnt out. Did you have any tips or anything that you did during these moments that helped you overcome those barriers and obstacles?
I guess just pause, take a step back, relax, don't sweat the small stuff, and always laugh a lot. I will have times where it's a bit low, and I think it's normal. And you have to acknowledge that, regardless whether you're a business, you're an individual, or a community. I think that's pretty much what life is, right? It's always up and down, and you just need to acknowledge it and accept it and just enjoy the ride.
That's amazing. And you talk on kindness and humor. So glad that your whole life really is around happiness. And that's really great, especially working in all these different environments, especially in service. It's really great that you're sharing this kindness to everyone.
I was an altar boy for many years when I was young. So I guess those readings in the Catholic Church when I was young helped me as well. When I'm serving, actually, in the altar as an altar boy, at one point I was hoping to become a priest. That's one influence to my life. All those learnings about ethics, just doing good, avoid evil, it's core to me. So that's why I think it reflects in whatever I'm doing.
Showing that you're doing an altar boy from a young age shows that you really had this passion to help people from the start. So it's very clear to me now why you started Code.Sydney, and you're also the Justice of Peace. You just love to help people, which is really great. Touching back on tech, obviously it's great to hear your journey of how you got to where you are. But for people moving into tech now, what are some common fears or misconceptions of people making the change, and how would you advise to address them?
Most common fears, especially those who are not knowledgeable in the industry, is they think that it's hard. And I think I agree with them. It is hard, but if you put in the effort, if you put in the time, I'm sure you will be able to do it. There are kids who can learn how to ride a bike in 3 months. Some will learn 1 week or so. After a year, both kids will just do the same thing. It's really about how you're going to manage the complexity around it.
Yeah, really insightful. For someone that's coming from ground zero, I guess, and it's never written a line of code before, in your opinion, how effective is programs like the Free Code Camp, Holberton School, or you touched on before, are you more inclined for people to do self-learning or attend something like Code.Sydney and learn on the job?
It's always a case-by-case basis. Based on our initial conversation with Holberton, I remember your curriculum. And you start with the core concepts of how to change the mindset. I'm a believer of that. Change the way you solve problems. You solve problems in the mind of a developer. If I remember correctly, you had, in the old days, we call it program logic formulation, how you structure a program, the control flow, such as sequential, conditional, and iteration. All of those basic core knowledge, if you have that solidified, you cannot go wrong. You can easily jump from one language to another. I think some courses online, they just jump in directly in the language and the syntax. I feel it's always best to start from the core concept of computing or programming.
Yeah, that's correct. All right. Well, I know you don't have too much time left, so we'll start to wrap this up. One question that I'm really interested in, Grammar, is for yourself, what are your goals? What's your short-term goals and what's your long-term goals?
I'm almost at the end of my career. My goal is just to progress until retirement in the corporate world. After that, just do Code.Sydney, serving people during retirement. That's my ultimate goal.
Yeah. And what are you most excited for in tech? Obviously, AI is huge at the moment, but is there something that's really catching you off guard or something that you're really excited for?
Just last Saturday, we just published a proof of concept of a ChatGPT app. The Justice of the Peace handbook. I actually uploaded it in ChatGPT, and I managed to develop a small app wherein the JPs can just ask a question and it's going to answer based on what is written in the handbook. And it's already live. You can just check it. It's askjp.au. So anyway, I have asked my colleagues, a couple of them, to try it out, and they're quite impressed. We're lucky, actually, that we live in this era, and we have seen it. We're seeing a transition again. There's industrial age and information age, the internet between 90s and 2000. And we have the mobile phone in the mid-2000s. And now we're living in a great age, and I'm hoping that we leverage that era. Going back to your question, it's really the AI side of things, large language models, which I'm very keen to learn more because I'm confident 100% that it's going to change the way we do things. Normally, you have to open the PDF and search for the information. But now I just uploaded the PDF itself to GPT, and it's able to inject the same knowledge base in its core knowledge. It aggregated it. I just need to make sure that I will learn how to reduce false positives and aggregate more enriched information.
That's really incredible. I'm going to have a look at that because that sounds really interesting, how you've implemented that for your PDFs. And I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in doing that in their own way because there's just so many documents out there and it's easily accessible like that. It's pretty cool. Just one final question before we wrap things up in grammar. If you could just leave one piece of advice for someone that may be a nurse or in sales that's really not passionate about their career and thinking about moving into tech, what would it be?
You only have one life. Try to explore other avenues. Jump in and see whether it's for you. It's not easy, but as long as you give your very best, you should be able to overcome that.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time in grammar. I really appreciate you giving up your busy schedule for me. You said you've had a day off today, so I hope you can enjoy the rest of your day off. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and your journey with me.